Welcome back to Digging Deeper. Today we're here to dispel all the myths about AI. Are you being bamboozled? Are you being grifted? Well, we'll find out today.
And we're back.
Today we have with us for the first time, and he has promised that if we get more than 100 views on this video, he will come back for another Digging Deeper. Our Chief Technology Officer, Nick Reed. Woo. We also have with us on the call today, Chad Lillian, an actual data scientist and actual genius, and also Katie, head of engineering. And she's a genius as well. I purposely did no research for this so that I could represent the lowest common denominator and be that voice for whoever watches this. So what is actually artificial intelligence? And how? Well, let's just start there. If you were to ask someone like, we'll start with you, Chad. Chad, if someone were to say, what is artificial intelligence? How would you define it?
So the goalposts have kind of changed.
It's not a hard definition.
Right. It's not. We don't have a great idea of what it would mean for it to be intelligent.
So for those that are watching this, would you say just because something could technically be classified as artificially intelligent, you shouldn't necessarily be impressed by it?
Oh, 100%. I mean, increasingly to Chad's point, where the goalposts have moved now is AI falls under anything that mimics human intelligence. So even classification and, certainly like generating text or language or chat or things like that. Mm-hmm. So I would say at the risk of being so broad as to not be helpful, it simply means that it mimics in some way human intelligence.
Well, so then with that in mind, and we talk about it is a very broad definition, and we were talking earlier about all the grifters out there. How is it being used? How are the grifters using AI to sell us a mechanical Turk?
When the layperson hears artificial intelligence, they probably picture something somewhere between like the Matrix and Skynet, and it's incredibly not that. So I think the first part is making it scary is the first thing to do.
Right.
Is as opposed to, hey, am I trying to use AI for generative purposes or predictive purposes? Which
right.
Most of your actual real things are going to fall in those two buckets. I didn't come up with that. Chad came up with that. But.
All right. Can you explain that a little bit?
So I'm either trying to predict whether something's going to happen. I'm trying to predict an outcome. Will this person purchase? How likely is this person to accept this job? How good of a fit is someone for a given job? What's the likelihood that a given candidate will make it, to obviously the thing a lot of people in our markets are interested in is, can I, in the same way that in consumer markets, mm-hmm. people try to predict the total lifetime value of a purchaser,
right?
Total lifetime value of a candidate for hire or things like that. There's interesting work going on with stuff like that. So those would be cases where I'm trying to predict some future outcome based off historical mm-hmm. training data.
Yep.
Versus generative is using library like Stable Diffusion we were just talking about, where you give it text to say, make a picture of a cat wearing sunglasses, and it will make you a picture of a cat wearing sunglasses. It generated content based on a text prompt.
Which of those is being kind of sold off as AI, especially in the world that our clients might see?
You see a lot of stuff over the LLMs like ChatGPT, where you're getting that generated text where, what they're probably doing, at least some things are doing in the background, or sending something off, a prompt of some kind, and getting something back, right? And that's where you get into the what value and what are they actually providing to you at what cost, mm-hmm. How much advanced modeling are they doing? Or are they just using a service to get you something back?
What are some examples? So we talked about mechanical Turk, and we'll put the definition up here somewhere around here, wherever you want to put it, Audrey, really. And what are some examples of that in the market? Not necessarily, let's say not our market, but where have we seen this already being pilfered around
to me, I think the big thing where, people are going to be using the terms AI and ML and, I don't want to say fraudulently, but just like, overselling it, let's say. For example, the neural networks that I've built, I'm using, and most people most people that do this are using the libraries that Meta, aka Facebook, and Google have built and released to the public. So you can use their actual code to build these things. The problem is that you have to have training data, good quality training data. Okay, and so these companies will say, we're using AI and machine learning to predict, right? But if they've got really bad training data, you're going to get very bad results.
Okay.
It's a garbage in, it's a data garbage in, garbage out sort of a thing.
You've essentially created a matrix in which your model is correct.
I think one of the, probably if I was to put the broadest category of griftering,
Yes.
I would say it's cases where somebody is taking some commercially available AI thing where it's, hey, this is something Google already does or Facebook already does or ChatGPT's commercial model already does, and then claiming you've got something proprietary, right?
Yes.
Like I have this proprietary AI. Like, no, you fed a prompt to a ChatGPT.
Right.
Like,
Or maybe they're doing that and they're open about it, but they're charging you an arm and a leg for it, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Have you seen it in our industries?
perhaps. I think
chances seem high, right?
Yeah, because in a lot of cases, digital marketing, TA, these are all spaces where it's hard for the person on the outside looking in to say, what is the vendor doing that's unique or proprietary or something that I couldn't write a prompt and do on my own.
Yeah.
Versus where they're just using these big commercial models. What's the line? It's really hard to see. And even when you've done something like we used the EDA example earlier where they built something really cool, it'd be hard for you to tell, right? Because the very nature of it is that you built this private model and it spits out an outcome. It's by definition a black box. So it makes it really hard to tell I think the main way to guard against that is to have some familiarity with what's
That's what I want to get
readily
to.
possible and available in these different categories of AI machine learning. Most AI applications that most people are going to encounter in the wild are machine learning.
So is ChatGPT would that be considered machine learning?
So ChatGPT would be
Generative.
in the machine learning category.
Okay.
I'm imagining if you had Venn diagrams and AI is like the broadest, machine learning.
Yep.
Probably I'd say LLM, generative.
LLM stands for what?
Large language model.
Large language
Which
model.
is just nice for saying it talks to you.
Okay.
And it has it's made vector associations between a whole bunch of words so that it can figure out context and meaning, what words most frequently follow these other words, and it's expressing it in terms of math and string distance.
So how do our clients, so we talked about the grift of basically, I'm just taking something that's already available and I'm tacking it on and claiming that it's proprietary. You said one way is just to familiarize yourself with it. What are some other ways that our clients can be like, it's not 100% a grift, but you might be wasting some money on it?
In a lot of cases, they are doing the work and they're producing a valuable outcome. It's just, hey, I probably either could have gotten somebody to do that for half that price or done it myself.
Well, what else can I do besides just understanding it more? Is that the main thing? Just educate yourself so where you can recognize that sort of thing? Or is there other like key signs you could look for to be like, that's probably just a tack on Gemini?
Like Nick said, some of this is the value you get out of it and what you're willing to pay for that. So there's not like some threshold to say you're getting bamboozled. It's, are you willing to pay for the convenience that you're getting for whatever they're giving you, right? So if you're feeding just something, let's just say you're feeding some messaging into it, right? And you're getting enough value out of that at the cost, then it's convenient for you. You don't have to build it yourself. That doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong, right? You just have to be aware of, is it worth it? Are you getting the value out of it? And are you willing to pay for it? And can you do it another way?
I mean, in some sense, it's like when you go to the grocery store and you buy the store brand cornflakes, they're actually being made by Kellogg's, right? But they've made a deal with Kellogg's, so they get it cheaper. And so, it's that sort of a thing. They're taking something, an LLM that exists, and they're repackaging it. They're doing something. They're doing some work.
I think the key in any emerging field like this is you just have to do a little bit more homework. So you have to talk to multiple experts. You have to get multiple quotes, because we had an example where we had some vendors where we were asking them to do work with some call transcripts. And the first person we talked to, the price tag was this big 6-figure thing that didn't immediately sound right. And then we talked to 2 more where, so it, like in Chad's analogy, the first one was cornflakes made of solid gold for the price versus the next 2 were much closer. And it was like store brand versus cornflakes. And it made a lot more sense.
Yeah.
And they were a lot more transparent about what they were really adding to a commercial application. I think that's the key, is because of the fog of war, you're going to have to talk to multiple experts to see, now, if everybody's giving me the 6-figure price, well, then this must be more complex than I thought, or they're having to build a lot more configuration on top of a framework versus being able to use something off the shelf. But that's,
I think if you're working with a vendor who's building something or training a model for you, right? You're going to have to be involved in that process to some degree, because I think anyway, you're going to have to test it. You're going to see some output. That's for, like, if you were building on top of some proprietary data, you would be involved in that process. That's not just like an off the shelf, like pick it up and use it. At least today, I think.
Yeah. I think, it's like anything else you buy, if you're talking to them and they're just throwing out a bunch of acronyms, ask them what LLM is. Okay. Demand that they tell you what these things are, and talk to their experts, even if you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like, hey, what LLM are you using? What framework are you using?
Okay.
How long is it going to take to train? Who are you? Like questions like that really, kicking the tires.
Yeah.
That's going to force them to, show you whether they really know what they're talking about or not.
So let me see if I can kind of reframe all this. So there is a lot of grifting in this marketplace, for lack of a better term. Most of it is taking publicly available, commercially available AI and tacking it on and then just repackaging it, selling it. It's still cornflakes, right? To fortify yourself against this, the best thing to do is educate yourself and learn a little bit and know what's available and learn the different things. Yeah. 2, make sure you're asking all the questions, ask every question, kick the tires, figure it out. And 3, talk to multiple experts. Get some people that don't have a economic incentive to tell you what you want to hear, to find out, what truly is AI, what you're being sold, and that sort of thing.
Right.
Would you say that's kind of
do. I think that's a great way to look at it. The other place to have more caution is, so we talked about, Chad had sort of, hey, you can put a lot of your AI and ML applications into the predictive versus generative.
Yeah.
Predictive is when it's going heavy math. Yeah. And it's like, I have to build a mathematical model that's going to predict a future outcome or transaction, or, Chad's working on one right now about trying to take all these inputs and predict what's going to happen with cost per lead in the future.
Right.
Which is as frustrating math as it sounds. So that's more in that predictive realm. And in that realm, you're going heavy math. And a lot of the discussions be about, okay, I got to choose is this application better for a gradient boosted decision tree versus a neural network? And it gets really quickly into what kind of regression model is it going to use, right? We're going very mathy. Versus, to me, a lot of the most egregious examples of I really just sold you marked up Chat GPT are in that generative bucket, where anything that's generating content, images, chatbots, transcripts, textual analysis, intent analysis, routine classification of content or stuff. That category there's so much more publicly available because all these commercial models that we were talking about, and especially like the Google and the OpenAI commercial models can do so much when it comes to generating content that's probably the main place to think, what am I really paying for? I'm probably not paying for high-end regression analysis, math PhD work. I'm probably paying for another one of Katie's favorite buzzwords, which is prompt engineering.
Yeah.
Prompt engineering sounds really it's like a perfect encapsulation of this. Katie, what did you say your definition of prompt engineering was?
You learn how to talk to it. Let me run. Like,
yes.
How do I talk to it?
How do I talk to this thing and make it do stuff? Like,
how am I talking to people?
Yeah.
That's right. But we call it prompt engineering because it's like, well, if you say it a little bit differently, it'll do different stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If you call it engineering, then the pay
more
scale is higher.
complicated.
And there is nuance to it, and it is something that you
Right.
can learn to do. And there is value in being able to communicate and, well, I say communicate, instruct an LLM to do what you want.
The human element of prompt engineering is a lot of trying stuff and poking it with a stick to see what actually generates what you wanted it to do.
Like the LLMs are actually like they're extremely complicated, far more complicated than anything that I'm working on. The difference being that like I'm starting from scratch, and it's manageable to start from scratch and train with the data that we've got, the kind of problem that he was describing that I'm working on. One person with one computer can do that. The LLMs, I actually looked it up to in preparation for this. ChatGPT-4, it's estimated it costs $100 million in power, just electrical power.
For how long?
To
Like
train
in
it for 6 months.
6 months. Okay.
Trained it for 6 months. So that's getting all this text from the internet and running it through this
Server farm.
the training. So it's there's hundreds of mathematicians and engineers working on that, and then they package it up and they hand it off to the world, and a person who's your phrase for prompt engineer can access it. So your run-of-the-mill company is not training their own LLM, except for you can add to that model your specifics.
You can train you can specialize on
Right.
top of the base of ChatGPT with your own data set to cater it somewhat to what you've trained it on, right?
Exactly.
So there's a really solid base, and then you can layer on top of it and get a more specialized response with all that knowledge underneath that it already has learned, right?
Exactly. And so if you're dealing with a company like that, they've got engineers that are doing that, and you can you can kind of dig into that and ask them questions about that. If it is just a bunch of prompt engineers in Brazil, then they're not going to have a whole lot of ansers.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
Exactly.
Well,
Building the LLM was incredibly expensive. Building a variant model on top of that framework is less so.
Yeah,
so I think that's a good thing to point out.
But it's still, if it's capable, it's still going to be. I mean, if it's $100 million to build that thing, it's still going to be very expensive to add something that's capable on top of that. So they're going to have real engineers.
Yeah. So we've kind of been talking about kind of the dark side, how people grift, how people kind of bamboozle those. And we're seeing it in our industry, our clients. We're seeing press releases. Anywho's, let's talk about the bright side, the light side, the good of AI and recruiting, how AI is being used in talent acquisition, HR departments. Let's talk about all the good things, for lack of a better term, that AI is bringing to us in the world of hiring.
I can start with a personal example. I mean, there's little productivity enhancements that are really available to anybody in any office job. Where I recently needed to open up a new job. I had never written a job description for it before, and I asked Google Gemini to help me write a job description with these 3 big requirements for this job title. And it gave me a workable draft
Right.
that I then edited, right? That's a classic example of just commercially or publicly available applications where don't be scared of it. Don't make it into this scary boogeyman. Just do simple tasks like that to help with, there's a lot of stuff that like helping you craft an email, helping you craft script for, you know, working with a candidate. Obviously you get then into chat bots and things like that there are a ton of providers out there for, and you can tune them and work with them to get the outcome you want. And they're helping you, each individual person, be that much more productive. It's taking some of the administrative and just content generation work and speeding it up.
This is going to be like a really simple version of what Nick said. Probably too simple. Is that anything you're Googling 25 different things to do?
Right.
If you just go to one of these LLMs like Chat GPT, you know, it's going to cater and give you a whole bunch of that information without you having to read 45 articles, do all that condensing of knowledge yourself. It's not perfect, but it simplifies a lot of that. And there's a lot that can be gained in a lot of different areas for a lot of different people in it, being able to get that information back to you in such a concise way, right? And you all, like it says at the bottom, you always need to fact check that.
Right now, you still need to iterate a little bit back and forth between the AI and a human to get where you want, to get what you want. But it's, you know, it gives you a great, you know, first draft. I mean, more than first draft, I'd say it's almost complete.
So still sticking with that generative
Yes, about to say,
AI
this is
bucket, that's where a lot of the things that you can do yourself to start demystifying. Sometimes it's content around, I know we played around with, can I prompt it well enough, we were handing it screenshots of landing pages or ads and asking a commercial model to help us write text, whether it was for like ad copy or deck copy or something, you know, and it could do pretty good. And then you could take it and clean it up.
Yeah.
And that was probably the first thing I ever did with it. I remember though, I think it's been over a year ago, we had a meeting with Google, and Brandon and Dana and some people from our team, we were trying to pull some data out of the Google API. Right. And I'm still in my like pre-AI brain. I'm like, okay, I'm going to pull up the API documentation. I'm going to find what all this stuff is called. What methods do I need to call? And Brandon put it in what was Google Bard at the time, now Google Gemini. And it like returned a piece of code that did exactly what I needed in the order I needed immediately, with all the right method names, API calls and everything. And that was probably, I know I'm late to the game with that because most day-to-day developers have been using a lot longer than a year and a half. But the fact that even in that case, simple stuff like, hey, I need to call, you know, the account API to get this ID, then the ad API to get this ID, then I can call the third one, and the methods are called this. It was so much faster than going through the API docs manually. That was the first time for me that the light bulb came on, like, man, if I'm doing any kind of API work where there's public documentation, there's no excuse not to put it first into something like Gemini or Chat GPT, because it just speeds things up so much.
All right, let's play a hypothetical. You just got put in charge of talent acquisition at a company. What are some of the first things that you start doing what are some of the first ways you start utilizing AI to create basically like training and learning, productivity, creativity, all these things that we're just talking about just now? What are some things that you immediately start putting into practice?
I think I would start with the things that have always been important and then think, how do I apply this tool set to help me do those things?
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with what Nick's saying. I think not that you can't get to a good answer, but a lot of times what you'll see is people, you know, come with the, I want to use AI intro. And a lot of times you'll get to a good answer eventually, but that's sort of the wrong question. And Nick kind of alluded to at the beginning, is part of it is really realizing what it is as a tool and making sure that you're in every decision you make, you're at least considering it as an option. That doesn't mean you're going to use it.
All right. So finally, our last thing we want to talk about is in the realm of Randall Reilly, RRR, the realm of Randall Reilly. How are we using AI? What are we looking into? What are we currently doing? What's on the horizon?
So we've been talking with some of our vendors about how to use some of our current data to leverage the potential use of some proprietary modeling or training, I guess, right? Training the model. I'm guilty of using the wrong words with it sometimes too.
For a predictive or generative?
Predictive.
Predictive.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a little bit of both. I think for a lot of the same things other people are doing with chatbot and content generation.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way we've been playing? We have tools today where we help clients write better job postings, write better job titles, write better job descriptions. We have that stuff today that's rules based.
Yeah.
Like, hey, put these inputs and we'll give you a rules based template basically to write a better job description. We've been playing with, hey, how can you use generative AI to try to do that where it's less template based and still try and produce a good outcome. We've done generative based stuff with other content. But I think the stuff I'm most excited about falls in the predictive bucket, like the things that Chad's working on, and eventually finding ways to say talent acquisition is a market that clears. There are, supply and demand factors, and there are all kinds of reasons why candidates choose certain jobs, why jobs are a better fit. Anything you can do to start getting any bit incrementally better at predicting those factors or who would be a better fit for them. Even simple stuff around, if we're going to show somebody recommended jobs, how do I make better recommendations? Right. The things that go into that realm of predictive, I think, have the most leverage in terms of being able to produce a lot of value. That's something that people in talent acquisition get intuitively really well. It's like, hey, if your lead to hire ratio is 50-1 today, and you could take it to 25-1, you immediately grasp how I don't have to be perfect. Right. Any improvement is going to have orders of magnitude benefit to me.
Will that predictive ability start even going on to like past the hire to like add more of the average lifetime value type play of like this type of candidate will stay longer and be more productive. He's going to drive more miles. He's going to actually, if we put it in the shop, this type of technician is going to produce more revenue from a parts and service standpoint.
I absolutely think that's the future. Yeah. One of the difficult things, and this gets back into the drawbacks, is, Facebook had a big issue where our categories around employment, things around banking and finance, famously, they've had to remove some of their targeting options because the AI algorithms behind the scenes were doing stuff that was discriminatory or racist or whatever. It's like, well, hey, your training set was full of people who look like this and they were from these zip codes. Therefore, I'm going to keep excluding all these other people.
So as far as what we're doing here at Randall, we are playing in the generative realm, but it seems like we have so much data from the just thousands of campaigns we've run for decades now that we really have the ability to feed the machine some very good data to train it on to really provide some very good predictive abilities.
And there's so many signals. We used to say when retargeting first became a thing, or even when we were first trying to rank content on our media sites, we would say a click is a vote. It was a way of us being able to tell what you were actually interested in. Was you had all these options and you chose the third one, right? And we could start to move it up or whatever. There are so many signals even based in what jobs are they most interested in? Why? What markers? You can go back and retrofit when you think about training data sets of, well, these are the people who chose to work for my company. Yeah. Here was what all this data behind, that decision tree looked like. how can I start to map to that? What does that tell me? So I think that's certainly the more complicated category of this, and it will take longer to get to. But I think that's, for me at least, that's the stuff that I'm most excited about.
Okay.
Because the changes, the productivity enhancers, things like that are really good because they're incremental. So you can get some small wins, but the things that are order of magnitude game changers are going to be in the predictive realm.
Okay.